So, who are you?
Who am I? I'm Steve Everett. I'm running for State Senate District 12 as a write-in candidate. Election day is December 23rd. Early voting starts December 8th through the 19th. And I'm looking to be an alternative to a candidate in Lee Bright who has a track record. And it's not a good track record. It's a track record of chaos and controversy and division. And I'm about trying to find solutions to problems.
So, when you mentioned Lee Bright's track record, is that what made you run?
I think in large measure. We live in strange times, and when I get up in the morning, unfortunately I feel anger and anxiety about the future, primarily for my kids and grandkids. And we live in a great state, in a great community, and Lee Bright's not interested in solving problems. And Lee Bright's not interested in the future of the state. And he wants to be in the 1950s, and that's not where we are. That's not where my grandkids are going to live, and we got to think about their future.
So, when you mention, when it comes down to Lee Bright's track record, he was one of, I think, 3 senators that voted to keep the Confederate flag up after the Charleston massacre. Yeah. How does that make you feel as far as him running for office to keep a legacy like that up?
Well, there's 2 points to that. One is just the moral and ethical portion of that. The horrific events that occurred 10 years ago by a young man programmed to be a white nationalist. And for the flag, for people to finally recognize that the flag is symbolic of a past that we don't really want to live in anymore. And so the inability to understand that and the unwillingness to understand that and to say this is like a Stalinist purge is really not acceptable. The other part of it is when you are trying to get people to move to the state of South Carolina for a job, for instance, or you're trying to get new investment into the state of South Carolina, the flag is a symbol of the past, and it's not something that people, I think it turns people off if they're thinking about moving here. And for those people who've grown up here, you'd sort of like them to stick around. And unfortunately, we lose a lot of people to other states because we're not as progressive as we need to be, and we continue to latch on to symbols of the past that should be put in the museum.
Right. As somebody who's worked in business, you've been working in business for well over 20 years. What have you heard from the business community when it comes to keeping relics of the past up? And, when we see people like Lee Bright fighting for that, it's almost like he feels like there's a place for that here. What have you heard from the business community?
Well, I think from the business community, as I've said before, they want a place where they can bring people to work, to have a decent community where there's good schools, where there's safe schools. Lee Bright wants to talk about stuff that doesn't really matter. And the stuff that matters is can we create an environment where business wants to invest? In the upstate of South Carolina, if I understand the history correctly, the company I worked for at one time showed up 50 years ago or so as the textile industry was leaving. And about 25 years after that, BMW showed up. This part of the state's a vastly different place than it was 50 years ago or 60 years ago. And Lee Bright's a relic of 60 years ago.
Right. And it sounds like you're the antithesis to Lee Bright. You're the exact opposite. What are your views on things like reproductive rights and the things that he is pushing to get rid of?
It always has been interesting to me when people try to label you as liberal or conservative, and I see where Mr. Bright talks about himself as being, the symbol, if you will, of South Carolina conservative values. Well, I don't know what doesn't make me conservative. I've been married for almost 47 years. I pay my taxes on time. I don't have any debt. I don't know what's not conservative about that. The other thing that I think is conservative is respecting other people and respecting their decisions, respecting their rights. Too much, or we've seen so much in the last few years of rights being taken away, and I don't think that's right. A lot of what we see going on in the country, I believe, comes from the fact, the realization that we are becoming a majority country, and change is hard, and people being upset about change is understandable, and there's nothing inherently wrong with people feeling anxious about stuff. But people also got to understand that every day there's change. Right. One of the things I've learned over the course of my career is that the politicians tend to be behind people. They tend to be behind the population that they serve and they represent. And which is why legislative bodies tend to be reactionary. And that's what Lee Bright is.
If you are elected, what is a policy that you feel like you would want to head start when you were in Columbia?
Well, in the upstate, what we're facing is pretty dramatic growth. So roads is the topic that people have been talking about for a long time. So basic infrastructure, which includes, schools. It includes, I think, going to be a lot of discussion about the income tax and how we tax. This is pretty boring stuff, but I think it's pretty important stuff because I think our tax code in the state is nuts. I don't think it works for most people. There's the discussion about abolishing the income tax. If you don't have an income tax, then the only thing you got are sales taxes. If that's all you have, that becomes the most regressive tax system you can find. And that's not good for people who are already stretched thin, trying to go to the grocery store and paying more for everything. And in some cases, folks having to work more than one job.
For many people, they say that the politics in South Carolina is too divisive, right? Yeah. Democrats don't work with Republicans, Republicans don't work with Democrats, yet they're all colleagues. Yeah. How would you go about working across the aisle?
Well, I think you try to find an issue or two that's important for your constituents, and you really hone in on that, and you find like-minded colleagues and try to find solutions to problems. This is not rocket science. This is interactions between people. And when you strip away the labels, you oftentimes find that the person you thought should be your mortal enemy, they actually got more in common with them than you thought that you would. So I think that's my approach to dealing with things. As an advocate for various business interests over the years, I think most people that I worked with would be hard pressed to say whether I was a Republican or a Democrat.
You're running an unconventional campaign because you're a write-in, and
right.
Write-ins face their own set of unique challenges. How do you convince the constituency that you're wanting to represent that being a write-in candidate is the right move for them?
So every special election is special. This election is more special than most because we're asking people to show up in December, a few days before Christmas, to vote. And what makes it even more special, to write in my name. And the reason why it's important is because I'm an alternative to Lee Bright, number one. I'm competition for Lee Bright, number two. Number three, competition's a good thing. And one of the problems that we have in South Carolina is it's a one-party state. But it's always been a one-party state. It's not, today it happens to be Republicans. 50, 60 years ago, it was all Democrats. It's okay to have competition. And that's what I'm providing. And I'm providing, I think, a viable alternative to a guy who's demonstrated that he's about the past, not the future.
Well, Steve, when people go to the ballot, how do they spell your name?
It's the woman Eve and the color red, as my father used to say. So it's Evered. You can pronounce it any way you want, but that's how you spell it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.